All right, everybody, I think it's just after 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started here. My name is T.J. Preuss. It's kind of a funky last name. It's spelled P-R-E-U-S-S, pronounced Preuss. And before I get into formal introductions of myself and the rest of our team, I wanted to start off by just thanking some folks here tonight. First of all, I want to thank my clients, Bill and Sue Stewart. They contacted me several months ago after contacting a number of lawyers, and we've dug into this, and a lot of people kind of know where it's gotten to at this point. We're going to explain that a little bit more, but I appreciate them spearheading a big part of this effort. I also appreciate your Board of County Commissioners, how proactive they've been as soon as they got wind of this. I appreciate your school board, how proactive it's been. And I appreciate all of you for showing up here tonight. Obviously, it shows your interest in what's happening. You want to learn as much as you possibly can. You're curious, and we totally understand that, and that's why we're here tonight. So thank you so much for being here. I've now been around the community for a little bit now, and pretty intensely the last couple weeks. And I'll tell you, the people I've met, just wonderful people. The property is beautiful, and just really have enjoyed getting to know a lot of people in your community. So thank you for being here. With respect to introductions, like I said, my name is T.J. Preuss. I'm with a law firm out of Kansas City called Preuss-Foster Law Firm. I'm here tonight with a former law partner of mine at Wagstaff and Cartmel, Brian Madden. Brian Madden is here with Amy Baldwin, a paralegal that works with his firm. From my firm, we have Sean Foster, my law partner, and Luke Callahan, a lawyer in my office, and Katie McGuire from my office as well. Over the last couple weeks, we have about 20, round the clock, 24/7, been answering folks' phone calls and trying to provide as much information as we possibly can. And everybody up on this stage, and Heather Ortega's in the back. You may have seen her when you came in. She's been answering a lot of those phone calls. Everybody up on this stage and Heather in the back have been working their tails off to get back to everybody and get them as much information as possible. So I want to thank them as well. By way of a little background of myself, I worked at Wagstaff and Cartmel for some 15 years practicing there, where I litigated against some of the biggest pharmaceutical and medical device companies in the world. While I was there, Brian Madden did some of that work as well. He also handled a number of environmental cases and became known as one of the top environmental lawyers in the state of Missouri. My law partner, Sean Foster, has recently handled a lot of cases for Missouri farmers regarding fraudulent grain scheme. He's been involved in those sorts of cases. Even Katie McGuire, our paralegal, she came from a firm that did a lot of environmental cases, Sugar Creek in Kansas City against petroleum companies, black powder down in Oklahoma. So we have a very knowledgeable and experienced team of lawyers and paralegals on our team here, and we're excited about it, and we're interested to get to know as many people as possible and learn more and more as we go along here. So why are we here tonight? Well, obviously, there was a lawsuit that was filed a couple weeks ago. That lawsuit spread pretty quickly that it was on file. I think it was announced to the county commissioners shortly after that. And then obviously the county commissioners have gotten involved, and there was a meeting here earlier this week with Evergy. So I think that's a big reason why we're here. As all that information has come out, a lot of people have a lot of questions. So we're really here tonight. The purpose of this meeting is to explain where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, okay? So where we've been. Like I said, the Stewarts asked me to investigate this case several months ago. And we got involved several months ago. And like any lawsuit that we take very seriously, the first part of our process is to do an intense investigation. And we did that. And as we investigated things, we found a lot of areas of concern. We saw pictures and videos of fly ash dust coming out of that site. We saw a lot of truck traffic hauling fly ash into the Montrose site from outside of the area. We saw with our own eyes as we came down here, we saw ash coming out of that pit. We saw equipment operating in that pit. We saw ash coming from it as that equipment was operating. We've seen videos of that. We also looked at data that is publicly available. And Brian will display this data later, but it showed a migrant of hazardous contaminants that exceeds levels. So all of those things to us suggested, okay, this requires further investigation. That's when we decided that the property near that site should be tested. So how do we do that? Well, as your county commissioners are learning, there's not a whole lot of testing sites out there that will test for these sorts of chemicals. We found one, an independent company, and we asked that it test some neighboring sites that authorize testing. We got those results back. We did another round. We got those results back. We did another round. We got those results back. As those results came into us, there were concerns in those. You have seen those. We'll talk about those more tonight. That's ultimately what led to us filing this lawsuit. We understand that there are now contaminants in some of these surrounding properties. We believe everything that we've seen suggests that those materials are coming from that landfill site, and that was the reason for the lawsuit that we filed on the Stewart's behalf. We've had other people ask us to file for the Stewarts, or for other folks like the Stewarts, and we intend to do that as well. We don't have all the answers sitting here today. We have a lot of answers from the investigation, but part of the reason for our lawsuit is there's a discovery process in any lawsuit in which we get to ask Evergy and the other defendants in the lawsuit certain questions. We get to take depositions. We get to find more answers. And I think that's what, from people I've talked to, what people are looking for, right? They want answers. We are doing additional testing. I've had a lot of people ask me that. There's just another round. There's more scheduled. A lot of people have asked us to test their property. We're trying. We're getting there. More and more testing is being done. But that's where we've been. That's where we are. And going forward, we will get additional answers from the lawsuit that's on file and more that we intend to put on file. I understand that at the meeting earlier this week, essentially the response from Evergy was, we don't know if it's coming from our site. It was, we think it could be from other places or things. We think the problem with that is this. It's your responsibility to know. Especially with the evidence, the facts that we've seen, especially with a number of the complaints that have come from citizens of this community to Evergy. It's your job to know. And if you have facts that it's coming from something else or some other place, let us know, but we haven't seen any of that. And for those reasons, we're pursuing this lawsuit, and again, others, and that's largely why we're here tonight, okay? I wish I could have gotten around to everybody in this room and everybody who had questions and met with them one-on-one, but obviously that's impractical and probably impossible. So once again, we appreciate you being here tonight and learning more about this. and we'll give you ample opportunity to ask any questions you have. At this point, I'm going to pass the microphone to Brian Madden.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Madden. I live and work in Kansas City. Lived in Missouri my whole life. I grew up in Lexington, Missouri, up the road. Went to the small Catholic school there. Graduated from the high school. Hopefully no Minutemen haters in here. But anyway, I have been involved in environmental work in Missouri for quite some time. Some of you may remember 20 or so years ago, there was a tannery in St. Joseph, Missouri that was land applying its sludge, and we did sampling and we found hexavalent chromium in that sludge, and that is the same chemical that is in the Aaron Brockovich case. And some of you may remember Aaron Brockovich came to the town hall we did in Cameron, Missouri. We successfully litigated that case and got compensation for everybody who had that sludge applied to their land. This case has, in part, that same chemical. We found hexavalent chromium in our sampling. Now, hexavalent chromium is not naturally occurring. It comes from industrial processes. Chromium can be in two states. Chrome 3 or Chrome 6. Chrome 6 is the hexavalent version. It comes out of industrial processes. And we believe the industrial process is the fly ash here. Hexavalent chromium is a known human carcinogen. There's no safe level of it in drinking water. It causes or is associated with lung, nasal, sinus, and stomach cancers. All 15 of the soil samples we took showed hexavalent chromium. We also found arsenic. You've heard of arsenic. In the old days, they used that to poison people. Known human carcinogen. It is naturally occurring, and there is arsenic in Missouri, but we found it above background levels. It causes cancers, including melanoma. We found high arsenic in 13 of the 15 soil samples that we took. We found radium. Radium is an unusual thing to find. We found very high radium in the Stewart's Lake or pond. Its maximum contaminant level is 5. We found it at 40 in their water. It causes teeth fractures, bone cancer. Lithium we found, it's associated with autism. We found that in some of the wells that we sampled. And lead, you all know, has cognitive impacts, and we found that at high levels too in our soil sampling. So when the stewards were trying to find somebody to help them and couldn't find help, and they went to TJ and TJ called me, I said, well, first thing we got to do is take samples. Let's sample the soil and the water and see what's there. And that's what we did. This is not something we made up. That's how you find out if there's a problem. So that's what we did, and those results have been made public because we don't want to hold information from anybody about what we found. So let's talk about the data. Evergy's taken the position of, well, we don't know if this is coming from us, it could be coming from somewhere else, and we don't trust your sampling. Okay, what they don't tell you is they have their own sampling. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of that. Let's start with the first slide, Amy. So back in 2012, the Sierra Club did a study of the Montrose Power Plant. Sierra Club is an environmental group. They did some air modeling in 2012. And let's go to the next slide. Next slide. And here's their air modeling. Right there in the middle of that model, this is for sulfur dioxide. So in 2012, as I understand it, the stacks were still up, the coal was still burning. Sulfur dioxide was being emitted. And and on your left-hand side is 71 Highway. So the emissions of that sulfur dioxide, which were exceeding federal levels, were emitting in all of that area, all the way over to 71 Highway, if that tells you. Now, sulfur dioxide is not what we're talking about here today, but when you start to look for sources of contaminants, you look at evidence like this, and this air modeling shows you where the contaminants are going from the site. All right, let's look at arsenic. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Amy. Okay, where else do you look? You look in water. This site has monitoring wells around the site. You may recognize the site with the ash piles. Each one of those circles is a monitoring well. Why do they have monitoring wells? So you can see if contaminants are getting off site. So this is for arsenic. You see the 2 orange wells are lit up. Okay. And let's go to the next slide. And these are their actual well data. You have a maximum contaminant level. This is from 2016 to 2018. And anything above that line exceeds the maximum contaminant level in those wells. So this notion that we don't know if arsenic's coming from us, well, there's the data. It's getting out through the water, at least. Let's go to the next slide. Cobalt is another thing we found in our sampling. Let's look at the wells for cobalt. You see wells on both sides of the site lit up for cobalt. And let's go to the data. All the cobalt readings are above the regional screening level. So regional screening level is the screening level at which cleanup is required. All their samples in their own monitoring wells are above that line. Let's go to the next one. Lithium. Lithium we found in our sampling. Every well lit up for lithium. Every one of their monitoring wells lit up for lithium. Let's go to the next slide. And you can see why. They're all above the regional screening level for lithium. This is not my data. You can go on the web and plug in Ash Tracker and plug in Montrose, and this will come up. Okay? Radium. We found a lot of radium in our samples. Let's go to the next one. 2 of their wells lit up for radium. And the next one, you can see 1 well's off the charts above the maximum contaminant level for radium during that 2016 to 2018 time period. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is a review of an air permit by MoDNR for this site. I think it's 2015. So this is close to the time when they're about done burning coal, as I understand it, right? Okay, so MoDNR, I haven't seen what Evergy was looking for, but I have seen, because it's publicly available, what MoDNR thought about their permit request. So let's look at that. Next slide. Okay, this is hard to see, so I'm going to read it to you. It's called Review of Application for Authority to Construct and Operate. It's addressed to KCP&L, 400 Southwest Highway P, Clinton, Missouri. The third bullet point says potential HAP emissions. HAP are hazardous chemicals. Potential HAP emissions from EP 09, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are expected to increase. This is in 2015, okay? And then it says, due to the increased ash handling rate. Well, we know what happened after 2015. They started bringing more ash in here from other sites. MoDNR recognized that those emissions may increase with this activity. Let's go to the next slide. Here it says right here from MoDNR, fly ash contains particulate HAPs. That's hazardous chemicals. Okay? Next slide. Guess what we put in the fly ash HAPs? Arsenic, cobalt, chromium-3, and lead. So to say we don't know what's in our fly ash, they knew back in 2015 what was in the fly ash. The same stuff we're finding in our sampling, right? And they're increasing it by these new activities. What are the new activities? Bringing in ash from other sites and piling it up. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Evergy submitted a post-closure plan for the Montrose generating station after the stacks came down. Let's see what was in their plan. No, they say no waste will remain exposed after completion of the landfill closure. Then it goes on to say, any other disturbance, such as removal of CCR, that's the fly ash, for beneficial use, is allowed if the owner or the operator of the CCR unit demonstrates that disturbance of the final cover or other components of the containment system will not increase the potential threat to human health or the environment. In other words, their plan, as I read it, was to cover the pile, which I understand from talking to some of you they're only doing right now. Okay? So, as part of this closure plan, let's go to the next document. They had to submit a fugitive dust control report. Okay? So, let's see what they said in that. This is from 2020. The purpose of this annual fugitive dust control report is to describe the CCR, which is the fly ash, fugitive dust control actions taken over the past year. You see it's Vermont Rose. They say the landfill is currently being used to dispose of coal remnants and fly ash from plant closure and may be used to dispose of fly ash from other Evergy facilities in Missouri. And we go to the next slide. They describe what their landfill is, which I don't understand this because I've driven out there and it's not a landfill, it's a small mountain. It's not at land level, so I don't know why they call it a landfill, but they do. And then they tell you in 2020 what they're going to do. Go to the next slide, Amy. They say, due to plant decommissioning activities, fly ash was added to the landfill in 2020. They say it was unencapsulated and conditioned before being placed into the landfill. That's when they dredged it out of the ponds. They say we do water spray to apply to it, including on the working face as needed. During high wind conditions, unloading operations at the working face were reduced or halted. After final elevations were achieved, the final cap and cover, including vegetation, was installed. This reduces the potential for the fly ash to be exposed to the atmosphere. Have any of you seen vegetation on top of that fly ash pile? I've certainly not seen it. So fast forward to, let's go to the next slide, Amy. 2023, their annual fugitive dust control report. Let's go to the next one. Can you go down to the bottom of that page? It says, the landfill is currently being used to dispose of fly ash from other Evergy facilities in Missouri. So here in 2023, they're admitting that that fugitive dust is coming in from other areas. And here, on the last page of our, go ahead, Amy, last page. You got one more? Here they say, again, during high wind conditions, unloading operations are halted. After final elevations were achieved, the final cap and cover, including vegetation, was installed. And then they say, we look at the dust twice daily to make sure it's not getting off site. So they added that in 2023. But the reality is there was never any cap, to my knowledge, put on this dust until recently. And okay, so I'm told there's an old site and a new site. But the bottom line is, on a daily basis, we understand trucks came in, they were dumping the dust. We've been told it was like being in a fire. It was so dusty out there some days. And their own documents indicate that what we found in our sampling is contained in their fly ash. So that's what we know. We don't know everything. The types of cases we're interested in pursuing include land and medical monitoring cases. So if you've been exposed to the dust, you're entitled to compensation to be monitored for potential health effects. But also, as I said at the very beginning, there are disease states that are associated with these chemicals. So if you live nearby, you're on a well, you may have been exposed to some of these chemicals that could lead to a health problem, and so we're looking at those too. So that's what we know. We're here to help. We're not here to cause alarm. We don't have sampling, for example, outside of the 5-mile radius yet. So for those of you who live outside of the 5-mile radius of the plant, we can't tell you that your property's been impacted. We can help you find out if it has, but we don't know that yet. So unless there's anything else, I think that's what we know, and if you have questions, we will answer them best we can. Thank you.
Okay, we have a list of speaker request forms. The first one looks like last name Bristow, B-R-I-S-T-O-W. I can't read the first name.
My question is, we have property 3 miles from the plant, right at the corner of P and 18, so the trucks are coming by our property every day. I want to know if my property is contaminated and we have cows on there drinking well water, are they contaminated? I mean, we raise the cows to eat. In fact, I'm picking one up from the butcher next week.
With regard to the hexavalent chromium, I can speak to that. Some of the other chemicals I cannot. It does not uptake in either plants or animals. So the hexavalent chromium will not uptake into the food chain. So it does not cause harm to your cattle that will then cause harm to you. I mean, it could, well, let's put it this way. Most carcinogens have a latency period. So if you're exposed to hexavalent chromium today, you may not develop cancer for 15 or 20 years, okay? Cattle aren't gonna have that type of lifespan. So I do not believe, with regard to hexavalent chromium, that would be a concern for you.
Okay, and another question I have is, say everything's contaminated in the 5 mile area. What kind of outcome are we looking at as far as a settlement or anything like that?
Sure. So what we're doing, first of all, I failed to mention this. We have not filed a class action lawsuit. We're filing individual lawsuits. Okay. So we filed a lawsuit for who stores property and monitoring their health. We're doing the same for others. But the lawsuit is seeking right now 2 things. One is to remediate your property, so to clean it up. And the cost to clean up your property, depending on the contaminant level and the characteristics of your property terrain, may be different from somebody else. So we have expert witnesses come in and look at that and make a determination of what that cost would be to clean up your property. That's 1. 2 is to monitor your health going forward, right? Have you been exposed? Okay, is that causing you any sort of health conditions? Well, you need to be seen by a doctor, probably more often than you currently are being seen. What that treatment plan looks like to screen your health to make sure you're not coming down with any health conditions from these contaminants is another part of the request right now. Okay, and with respect to, I know a big concern here, understandably so, is the school tested high for a lot of these, and what about the kids, right? Same thing. I mean, let's get a medical monitoring program for these kids. If we can save 1 kid, right, from getting a disease they otherwise wouldn't from the medical monitoring program, my gosh, let's do it. Shelley Zimmerman, who's next on the speaker request form. Yes, ma'am. You'll need to press the button on the top of that microphone. I think it's on. It's on. You're good. It's on.
It's on?
It's on, yes.
Can you tell me whenever you bought Montrose Power Plant? What year that was?
You mean from KCP&L?
Yes.
I don't remember the exact date.
Okay. Kind of like to know that. Have
It's readily
several
available.
things.
It's readily available online. I think on every
Yeah, I just looked.
website.
I couldn't find it. Yeah, I couldn't
it's about
find it.
2017.
But okay, I would like the audience to get on your computers and look up Epic Times United Nations 2030. We're talking big land grabs by the Department of Natural Resources. I have no idea if that is what is happening here. I do know that I worked these power plants in the bottom of the boiler with all the fly ash, off and on, a great deal of time for 20 years. Still pretty healthy so far. Hopefully I stay that way. I'd like to know if some of these chemicals are Agra application. You tell us that all the wells around the power plant tested positive for lithium. Georgia, where there was a big natural disaster, sits on a huge lithium mine. Takes a lot of lithium to build all these new electric vehicle batteries. I don't know if this is what's happening or not, but I would like this community to keep their eyes open. A land grab does not start and happen fast. It's created over many, many years. I went to the first meeting, maybe it was the second meeting, on the fly ash. The DNR was told about it. The EPA was told about it. Months went by and I never heard anything about it. Then the solar farms come into play, and our commissioners did that a little underhandedly. There's a big pushback on the solar farms. We don't want them in our area. So kind of seems kind of funny that we create this big scare now. And of course, when the government wants something, they scare us with our children first. So, I don't know. And I spoke Monday night, and the Biden administration, and I misquoted, the Biden administration had mandated 31 million acres of land for green energy. I misquoted and said it was 351 million, so I'll be the first one to say I'm wrong. It was 31 million. I'd like to know if this hexavalent chromium is an AGRA application. Can anybody answer that?
To my knowledge, it's not. It's associated with industrial processes. So it is not something that would be land applied. With regard to your other point regarding lithium and some of these other things, the slides that I showed reference a RSL or residential screening level and an MCL, maximum contaminant level. Those are set by the EPA and by the state as to what the maximum allowable levels are before you're required to clean up. So anything above those lines exceeded those standards.
And when were these first samples taken? Did you say like 2013?
The water samples that I showed you that I found online on Ash Tracker were between 2016 and 2018.
Okay, and did no one tell the DNR or the EPA about this? Why wasn't something happening at that point? Why now?
I can't answer why DNR or EPA did not act on anything that I showed you.
Well, I'm very well read on all this stuff, and this is why I'm bringing it to your attention about the possibility of a huge land grab. We have Truman Lake, we have wonderful farmland. Just keep it in your mind. I don't know. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next speaker request was Scott Mosley.
My name is Scott Mosley. I own about 100 acres 4 miles due north of this site. So some of my questions that I wrote there, I think you answered. So how do we prove causation? Because that's going to be their defense, right? It wasn't us. And I saw some of that, and it certainly is overwhelming evidence. I just don't know is that enough to prove causation?
I would say absolutely yes. Based on what we know, what we have, all sources are suggesting it's coming out of there. Until somebody can point some other alternative source to explain what we're seeing, absolutely.
So is that, and I'm not an attorney, so is that the standard? You have to, if I'm them, do I have to prove it came from somewhere else? Or is that enough overwhelming evidence that a reasonable person would say, unless you can show me something else, that's it?
You're going to look at all the evidence and more likely than not.
Okay.
Is it more likely than not coming from their site?
When we talk about health monitoring, so we unfortunately just bought this property 3 years ago and just built a very big building, a house on the property, which is disturbing. In terms of damage, if we show that the property is contaminated, I'm a former banker, so we can do a phase 1 and look at what's there. I don't know, is there remediation? Is there a phase 2 that actually works for this stuff? Or is it, someone will say, yes, it will work and it will take 150 years or 500 years or something along that line?
So part of our job is to bring experts to the case who can put a number on cleanup costs. There is an expert that I work with who actually designed the cleanup for Hinckley, California, which is there in Brackenridge case. He is the type of expert we hope to work with to come up with a remediation plan. If we can first prove the source and the extent and the need for cleanup. So yes, you can't put a dollar figure on those things.
Okay, and then regarding health issues, since we don't live here yet, okay, my wife, myself, our family gets monitored every so often. We settle this case at some point in the future. 15 years from now, I get one of these cancers. How do I prove it came from that? Because their argument will say it's not, I'm assuming.
I'm sure that won't be their argument.
Right.
But yeah, it certainly could be proven at that time. That would be a separate claim that you could bring at that time. And you would prove that there was X amount of exposure You were exposed to that exposure for a certain amount of time. That amount of time was significant enough, and exposure was significant enough to cause whatever the condition it is that you have, and therefore that was the cause of your condition.
Okay.
I mean, again, it's a lot of toxicologists and experts depending on the type of condition you have. It's cancer oncologists who would opine on those subject matters.
Okay. And, well, it would be a lawsuit, so then either they would pay for it or I would pay for it, or, yeah, well, it depends who wins. My expectation, and this is where, again, I'm not an attorney, my expectation was we were gonna talk about filing as a class. You're filing individual suits. I'm sure there's a reason for that. Is the intention to eventually flip this into a class or not? Or if you don't want to talk about strategy, I get it. I just don't understand.
Right. The reason for the initial lawsuit is to get things going and find out the truth. If our lawsuit causes MoDNR and Evergy to go out and do a bunch of sampling and tell us there is not a problem here, then so be it. But we need that lawsuit to get things going and discover what's really going on here. And if there is a problem, stop the trucks, stop the ash, get it fixed. Okay? But back to your question. A class is an option, but as I said earlier, we don't know the extent from the ash pile that we have contamination. So it could be that it's a 5-mile radius and there's only a couple hundred people within that 5-mile radius who own land. That probably would not be appropriate for a class. So that's part of what our strategy is, to try to find that out.
Okay, and I assume that testing, as you get further, if it's in groundwater and it goes into Truman Lake and goes into Lake of the Ozarks, that's where you can start to say, okay, this is affecting tens of thousands of people or something along that line.
Okay. With regard to the groundwater, as you saw from the slides that I showed, not all of the contaminants got into all the wells.
Right.
More likely than not, the extent of the groundwater plume of contamination is not far from that plant. Okay? We don't know about the stream that leads from the plant to the lake yet. We don't know that. Something we hope to find out. But what I showed you is monitoring well data from the groundwater. So we haven't seen a big plume in the groundwater yet. We'll do more sampling. The bigger problem we've seen is in the soil, which is likely coming from air emissions.
Okay.
Okay.
And last question, I don't want to take up everybody's time, and maybe this is a better kind of question, and if it is, and you can say whatever you want to say, are my wife and I better to go out and find a separate environmental firm? I know a lot of them that will do this. Are we better off doing that so we commission it, we're paying for it, it's maybe more independent? I'm not sure if you're paying for it, who's commissioning it. I don't know how Evergy's defense changes if it's a law firm versus an individual, or is there no difference at all?
I don't think there should be a difference. I think they may try to point out a bias in the testing that's been performed so far. That's not going to happen. It's not there.
Right.
That's an independent testing company, just like any testing company you would hire. So practically, I don't see any difference.
Oh, okay, I just didn't know if, in other words, we picked one, not the one you used, if that would be better evidence or not. I don't know.
I don't think it would be.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely, thank you. Next here is Sherry Albin.
Could you hold the microphone a little closer to you so we can hear a little better?
Yes, sir.
All right, appreciate it.
First of all, I just want to say thank you guys. And Bill, Sue, my heart goes out to y'all. And I appreciate you coming forward. Second of all, I want to say I sent some information to Katie. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my security camera at home. And I'll be more than happy to lay my phone up there for y'all to look at. You have seen the video. I have video streaming right now live at my house with little particles of junk. There's no wind, none. At first I thought, there's something out there, spirits, whatever you may think, all right? But as I got to looking more and watching this through the winter, there's not any bugs out there in 12 degrees, right? And there's, right here, is the evidence. If you guys have a Ring camera, pull your footage, look at it. It scares me to death. And I don't know, I want answers. I'm 7.5 miles from the dump site. I am 2 miles from Davis R12. My spouse and I just bought this house a year ago, September. I don't know. And I want answers. And I want this to be shut down. So I appreciate everybody coming out here tonight. Check your cameras. And please help us. Please stop this trucking of this toxic waste coming into our community. That's all I have.
Thank you. Dwayne Grimes asked, Lake of Ozark possible contamination. I think we've answered that. Too early to tell on that. But Dwayne, if you have other questions, please come up.
Thank you. Is there plans in the future for extending that testing out past Montrose Lake? Because it ends up at Lake of the Ozarks.
Yeah, we're testing further and further out.
Okay. Are you trying to contain that water in Montrose and keep it there as much as you can so that it doesn't get into Truman and everything downstream?
We don't have that capability.
Is anybody looking at this?
We're doing the samples, but containing that water in Montrose, we don't have that capability to do that.
Is there anybody here that can look into this? Because it needs to stay in Montrose. I hate to say it that way.
It runs over the dam anyway. If they got the gate open, it's still gonna run over the dam. The dam is 13 foot tall. The water's gonna go through. That's just the way it is. You can't contain it. It's been that way for years. I duck hunt. I've swam the lake. That's the reason I'm here. I've seen all the shit that goes up in there on sunny days. It's all over my decoys.
I was in oil and gas development for more than 25 years. I was on some major projects that we had to clean the water up before it went back into the stream. I know it's capable of being done. I know that there is particular techniques to say that can clean that water so that they can discharge that water downstream. I think y'all need to be looking at this. I just got involved. I just learned about this first of the week. I did environmental consulting those 25 years. I know a little bit, but nothing like what you guys do. You know more about this than we do, and I think you can help us at least slow it down if there is a problem.
And I can't personally, contain that water, but that is, again, a part of these lawsuits, is to remediate the situation. And if that's what needs to happen to remediate the situation, which makes total sense to me, that absolutely is going to be part of this litigation.
Okay. This watershed is incredible. It's gonna affect a lot of people if this thing doesn't get under control. The one thing, I don't know how many of you are aware of Pitcher, Oklahoma. It's no longer there. They mined zinc out of there, clear to Joplin, way back World War II. That is nothing but cement slabs there from the houses that used to be there. I used to ride those chat piles when I was a kid on a three-wheeler. It's not there anymore. I'm concerned.
Thank you. Next is Katie Shipman.
Hello. So my uncle works at a power plant who used to burn coal and they no longer do at his particular facility. However, it's Ameren Electric Company. And so I'm just curious, I'm sure you guys have, I have too, but has anybody else looked at what is considered the best practice for disposal of fly ash? In the past, Ameren has been accused of doing the exact same thing that's going on here in Montrose, but with an improper or lack of a barrier between the ground and the fly ash itself. And I mean, is what they're doing the standard even, right?
We have been in talks with people who have worked with fly ash, who are experts in that arena. We're told that the best way to keep the contaminants from entering the groundwater is to have a lined pond. We know in this case that one of the ponds was excavated in the early 2020s and excavated and then put onto the landfill. We can presume there was a problem with that pond because they excavated it, and the documents I've seen would indicate it was not lined. So that's what we know. There was a question, there's no name associated with it. Will there be legal representation for children who have recently developed symptoms in the last few months? So part of the reason we're here today is not just to inform you, but to the extent any of you have a property or a person that you want to discuss with us who may have been impacted by this, after our meeting, talk with any of us, and we can explain that process to you. So if you have a loved one who passed away from cancer and lived near the plant, and you want to talk with us about that, we can talk about that. If you have acreage that you're worried is contaminated, we can talk with you about that. We'll do that with you individually, any of us, after the meeting today.
Those are all the speaker request forms I have. Any others come in, Katie? Any other questions out there?
What about the flag that was used that's commercially out on the ground? What the microphone? What about the flags that was used commercially out on parking lots, street base, cut into the soil to tighten up the soil? What are they gonna do with these sites?
We would need to know more about that, the timing and how that was used.
Yeah, but, well, one of the bases that I know of is in Harrisonville at Price Chop or whatever it is. That whole parking lot was cut full of flies to tighten it up because of the salt. It wouldn't tighten up. So the whole fly ash in there and dumped it, and then cut it in with a big cutter blade. Rolled it back and forth, buried it then. Now, is that gonna cause contamination down the road?
This is new information to us, and I would like to talk to you about that afterwards if we could explore that a little bit more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Along those lines, part of what we understand is happening here with the fly ash is, A, it's being trucked in from other facilities. We don't know why they can't dispose of it closer to those other facilities. We don't know the answer to that yet.
I asked that question, I don't know why.
Okay,
The plant they're bringing it in from, they were storing it there, they ran out of room.
okay. There is an economic benefit to fly ash for them. They can bring the fly ash in, they can store it, then they can resell it for use in concrete. That's what we understand is happening. I think once it's bound in the concrete, there isn't a problem with it. It's a beneficial use, but part of the problem we believe you have here is that when they come in to truck fly ash out for concrete, they're disturbing the pile. So this notion that it's capped, they told the state we're gonna cap it, we're gonna put grass on it, we're gonna bring our lawnmower on there and mow the grass. That hasn't happened, right? So part of what our lawsuit alleges is they didn't properly manage the ash, they disturbed it, and it made its way onto other people's property.
One of the things that the Evergy representative, Mr. Cable, stated at Monday's meeting, they are not selling it according to him. I have to call BS on that, that's what he said. Yes.
They won't stop calling it.
Do we know where the city of Montrose gets the water for the city water?
So that's an interesting question, and if any of you have anybody in Montrose government who's an old timer, I'd like to talk to them, because our research indicates that 20, 25, 30 years ago, Montrose drew its water from 3 wells north of Montrose. They then shut in those wells and hooked everybody up to rural water. We would like to know why that happened, because it looks like they knew there was a groundwater problem nearby. So if anybody knows anybody in Montrose who was in government 20 years ago, I'd love to talk to them.
The other schools like Montrose and St. Mary's, where they get tested also. Because the students from we all go together as a community.
All right.
I mean, the kids play together, if they're playing on the playgrounds, they go to this kid's house, and if their clothes and their shoes and everything's contaminated, they're taking that to vehicles, they're taking that to homes. How do you clean that up? How do you keep that from happening?
Okay, so that's a good question. The school that's near the ash pile is Davis. Is that right? Davis. We did sample there. We did find elevated levels there. The school reacted to that when we told them what we found. A lawyer with the diocese called me this week and said, I've got a school in Montrose and Clinton. Do we need to be worried? And I told him, we haven't done sampling out there yet, so we're not going to raise alarm. Part of what we're doing here tonight is finding people who want us to do sampling in places like these schools, and we can make arrangements to do that. But we're not going to raise alarm at those schools without the sampling. And so, yeah, so. Well, it's my understanding that the Davis School has moved its operations elsewhere.
I'm talking about a local resident. Some of those residents go to Montrose School. Davis only goes from kindergarten through 8th grade. So once they graduate 8th grade, they either go to Clinton, they go to Montrose, they go to Lakeland, or they go to Sherwood. The parents get to pick depending on where they live.
Okay.
So there's kids in those contaminated areas, and we're asking if they are on their property and their clothes are contaminated,
say this, I'm not a toxicologist, so I don't know, but based on my experience, that should not be a concern unless the kid is out digging in the dirt, rolling around in it. There has to be a disturbance of the soil. So no, I wouldn't discriminate against some kid who happens to live on property. No, no. No, I understand your question and your concern, but until we know more, I would say that should not be a concern.
Yes, ma'am. Would you mind coming up to the microphone? Thank you.
Is it working? I have 3 kids who go to Davis, and we also, I'm under of the understanding that the school is about 4 miles-ish away from the ash pile. My home is also approximately 4 miles away from the ash pile. And with my kids, all 3 of them going to school at Davis, and my home being in about the same proximity, is my home, I know you guys don't know, but like, it's safe in my head to assume that the contaminated approximately 4 miles to one direction, it's very likely that it's contaminated. Right, so I don't know, like, what do I do?
Could be, but we would want to, you'd want to sample your property.
Yeah.
You want to organize that sampling for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is just really freaky.
yeah, understand. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, sir, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic, thank you.
Could you go into a little more detail on where the sample has been taken as of this point? Just because it's been like close to 12 residences that have been, has there been 12 residences that have been taken around? I'd just like to know where those were taken, or I think people would like to know where those samples were taken from. Or kind of an overview of a map.
Okay, the samples we've taken thus far have been on both the north and south side of, is it called Montrose Lake? Is that what you call it? So due north, due south, and then the prevailing wind patterns we believe are from southwest to northeast. So we've taken many samples towards the northeast and some samples towards the southeast. We have not, as of yet, taken samples to due west of the site.
And have all those samples coming back positive for the heavy metals up to this point? And
The soil samples have, not all the wells. Remember I talked earlier about we don't think the groundwater plume is
Right,
as far
right.
out as the soil.
so how many miles from the lake then roughly, just roughly? Is it about roughly 4 miles from the lake or 5 or?
Well, the furthest out we've tested would be the Davis School, which I just heard was about 4 miles out.
Okay.
So,
And I have one other question. So I'm just looking online, and you probably have a little more better answers to this. But like the brownfield area, what constitutes something being a brownfield area, and the chemicals I've seen that have been tested positive kind of relate to that?
Okay, so I'm going to show a little bit of my ignorance here. So I do environmental work, but not regulatory work. So regulatory work is dealing with DNR, and I bring lawsuits for people who've been hurt or contaminated, okay? It's my understanding, and I could be wrong, that the brownfield program is for businesses that voluntarily want to clean up their properties, okay? So Missouri and most states have what's called a voluntary cleanup program, where they go to the regulators and they say, you know what, regulators, we've got a problem. We would like to enter into your voluntary cleanup program, and trust us, we'll clean it up.
So that's all voluntary.
Okay? That's voluntary, and the state says, okay, we trust you. you report to us annually and tell us how it's going, okay? That's what I think a brownfield program is. To my knowledge, there is no, we have the closure plan that I showed you. To my knowledge, there is no voluntary cleanup plan in effect at this ash site.
Okay. That could be, they could do that at a later date.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Is there another question?
I was wondering, what are the odds of an injunction to pause their operation at some point until this case is heard? And my second question is, when do you expect that this will come to court?
An injunction, highly unlikely. But we brought a claim for nuisance, and in a nuisance claim, you can seek abatement. So when you win, if and when you win the case in front of the jury, then one of your remedies is to go to the judge if you win and say, "Judge, stop them," and the judge then has the authority to issue an abatement order. The problem, of course, is these cases take years. And so, you know, it's gonna be a business decision for KCP&L, Evergy. You know, if they're really gonna keep hauling ash in here or not. I'm told anecdotally they haven't hauled in a week or so. So maybe there's an impact already, I don't know. I understand from your meeting the other night, they said we're still gonna haul ash in here. So, you know, it's ultimately a business decision for them. What we can do as lawyers is seek abatement, and our lawsuit does seek abatement, okay?
You know, I usually tell people from the time of filing, it's a good couple of years until we can get a jury trial, which is ultimately what we're seeking.
My understanding is that most of this fly ash being brought in is from Hawthorne Power Plant, which sits on the Missouri River in the city. So, could you entertain the possibility of testing the water below Hawthorne Power Plant on the Missouri River and the land around there, so you would have something to compare it with? And I wonder if has anybody in the audience heard of cloud seeding? Not very many, so y'all better look up cloud seeding too, because they're, messing with our weather, and we could have some metals, some stuff in our land because of that also. I'm not letting the power company off the hook, that's not what I'm doing here, but, because I think there's probably contaminants out there too. I just want people to be aware.
With respect to Hawthorne, if it is, and that's my understanding as well, if it is being brought in from Hawthorne, we can ask for that testing from that facility as well in the discovery in the lawsuit. Yes?
What are the chances that they're gonna claim that this was all from Kansas Fahrenheit when it was running? Is there a chance of them claiming that and not their fly ash pile? And if so, what are you guys gonna do about that if they claim that?
So we've alleged both ways in our lawsuit. Okay, so at this point, we don't know if it's due to historical practices before the stacks came down or after.
Okay.
However, I would say based on what people have told us, that is visibly seeing the ash on their cars and their roofs, and I would say more likely than not, it's current practices.
Okay. And then we have family that born and raised out there right in front of that power plant, about a mile and a half away, something like that, died at a young age of brain tumors. And I know that you did say something about that. So would that would be a different lawsuit?
It would be. So showing my age, going back to Cameron, Missouri, and land application of the tannery sludge. What first caught our attention in Cameron, which is a community about the size of this, I think, is what we believed was a cluster of glioblastoma brain cancers. Okay? We had no idea what industrial processes were going on up there, but that was our first signal to investigate. And then we got up there and we got in the records and we found this land application program because of brain tumors. So
Two of them in my husband's family.
So that is something we would definitely look at and talk to you individually afterwards tonight.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Deb Isabel. I live in Warsaw, but I've been in this parts for a long time. And I was talking to my son, Matt Stevens, earlier today. TJ, nice to meet you. And so a couple of the things that, so I'm not saying anything, my son, Matt Stevens, is not an attorney. He works for a large law firm in this city. And I was asking some questions, and I'm going to ask you those questions here today, or tonight. Is it better for these people to use the same attorney for all of their, if they do individual, solo, whatever, suits? Is that the best way for them to go? And then compared to your earlier remarks about the class action, I know that there's an attorney, local attorney, who's talking about meeting tomorrow night at the Rotary Club, and he's talking class action. So I really wonder if you, well, I saw he's put out two statements, so I've read them both. That's all I know, just from the statements that I've read. So are you in a position to give them advice as to whether or not a class action? You mentioned earlier it would not be good because of the numbers, but would it be good for them all to use the same attorney, not under class action?
Okay, one thing about class actions is you can't, if you have a personal injury like a brain cancer or any other personal injury, that's not subject to a class action. So a class action could be brought for property and for medical monitoring, but if you have an individual injury, it's not properly part of a class action.
Okay.
So
I did understand that there were some risks there involved with following the class action route, but I wasn't sure. So,
yeah.
thank you.
Let me give you an example of Cameron. In Cameron, we brought individual cases that eventually the defendants wanted us to turn it into a class action so they could buy their piece. Okay? So that's always a possibility. But my firm and TJ's firm both do a lot of what we call mass tort work. Mass tort work means we represent a lot of people on individual cases and we treat them individually. Okay?
Who's next? Yes, sir.
Yeah, we were a little late arriving. Have you guys, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything, have you guys investigated medical occurrences that would be like a bloom in this area? Have you seen that? Is that something?
Yeah, we touched on this earlier. We are investigating those claims. We are taking data and mapping it for injuries, conditions, illness, for instance, to see if there are clusters here. And we certainly are exploring those sorts of claims as well.
We live, and this is really not related to Flyash as far as I know. However, wind can carry it, as I understand, quite some distances. We live out towards Blairstown, just north of Clinton, on an old coal mine, strip pit. And there's a lot of coal mines out here. A lot of coal was dredged out of here back in the 30s, Peabody coal mine. They came in and reclaimed the area. We're living on that. My wife has just been diagnosed with a tumor, a jugular paraganglioma. And we're concerned that we may be living in a toxic area. And we'd like to get ourselves tested somehow. Is there a way we can do that?
Yeah, we've mentioned, just run us down, anybody on our team after the meeting and tell us more about your situation.
Okay.
We can talk to you about that.
All right. I don't know how many coal mines there are or dredging that Peabody did. But if you do an aerial of our area, there is a lot of standing water from all of that. And then when we have floods during the spring times, it all comes through our area, ends up in Truman, and on down to the Lake of the Ozarks. And a lot of water gets moved. So if we do have a contaminated area, we'd certainly like to know. We appreciate your help.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Larry Martin. 40 years ago, I hauled ash for about a year, and my belly started growling, the job come up, and I took it. But you said a while ago, but Average, you said the other night, all this ash that's coming in out here is from Hawthorne plant, all of it. I don't buy that. I don't think it's all coming from up there at Hawthorne. But the thing of it is, we're getting dumped on. I mean, it's a mess. I've been out there, drove out there by it and everything else, and they can say all they want to about these trucks is contained. These trucks is not contained. They've got 3 doors on the top where that stuff dumps in. It gets all over the top of that trailer because I've had people hollering at me and everything else when I'd pull out of the power plant because the ash is blowing off of the truck. They've got pipes that they haul that comes out of. It's like you put on the trailer truck or whatever. It's flexible pipe. Ash will blow out of that. Ash will run. You can take ash and throw it up in the air. It'll never hit the ground. It blows away. And you don't have to have much wind. But how much fill are they putting on the ash out there? Is it a foot? 2 foot? I can guarantee you if they're putting 2 foot on there, they're not going to grow no vegetation on that ash. It's not going to grow. It just simply won't grow.
Yeah, and we don't know the answer to that question yet.
Okay.
I've also heard that the ash may be being hauled in from Lacine.
Well, Evergy said the other night, all of it comes out of Hawthorne.
Yeah.
They also made the statement one time that some of it came from Lacey.
Did they?
Yeah.
I never caught that.
But they had all been saying all along it's all coming from Hawthorne.
But when I hauled ash there for a year, I hauled it out of Iatan up there at Weston. I hauled it everywhere. And it goes in, and they said that they don't sell no ash. Are they in control of the ash now? Or is there somebody else that's in control of it? It's still being used in concrete. It's still being used all over. A lot of your Kansas City motels up there has got ash on it because they worked the ground. The ground wouldn't work right. So they took ash in there, they tilled it up, watered it down. That's how they got the ground where it would hold a foundation. I mean, this is a ridiculous mess, and hopefully it can get straightened up. I mean, hopefully it can. Because we've got kids, grandkids, growing up. We don't want to see them come down with cancer. Fact is, right now, I've got bladder cancer. I'm fighting bladder cancer right now. Today, and I've been using this rural water, and I don't know whether it's tested bad yet or not, any of it, but I'm just down the road there about 2 miles, 2.5, 3 miles, at a little town called Ladue, and I'm in making my coffee out of this water that comes out of this thing. Today, I played a little deal on my wife. I had some spring water there that I bought in town. I mixed a pot of coffee, and she said, "Man, this is good. This is good." But here, last year, I was out there farming, and I run out of water. And the guy brought me a cup of water. I couldn't drink it. It's that nasty. But they're treating our water with all kinds of stuff. We know it's all of the stuff's cancer killing. Just like but they know it's killing us. They know it. So, well, hopefully I'll get out of here again tonight. Like I said, I was a Flyash hauler because the other night I didn't know if I'd make it or not.
Well, I heard you told the folks that you dumped a load of the ash in the lake. And maybe you'd been pulled over for some of that coming off the truck. Well, we appreciate it, sir. And we thank you. And we'd be happy to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, we recently.
We do have to cut it off at 7:30, but I think we have time for a few more questions. Go ahead, sir.
We recently got on your roster to be tested. If our groundwater comes back and it tests positive, what does that do for my home value? Because if I turn around and try to sell it, then I have to disclose that on the selling of my property. And in doing so, I'm 3.5 miles from any water source. I can't afford to run rural water out there, but my house value will be tanked.
You're right, and that's a part of the lawsuit. Again, it's the remediation efforts. There are going to be occasions, though, that
include the well water, because we're 3.5 miles from water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I know you all said it's within 5 miles, but like my husband's been fighting stage 4 cancer. It's esophageal, it's 4 stage, it's gone to his brain, his liver, and it's lymph nodes. And my question is, okay, so when you reach the 5 mile marker, you're going to keep testing the soil as the farther we go to make sure that our town is safe from Clinton. Because I mean, he's only 4 years old. Like, of course, I'm going to show up here and wonder if this is probably the source.
Right. Yes, that's exactly our intent.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
I would not recommend getting a current appraisal for litigation purposes unless we find contamination on the property. So historically, you can look at the fair market value of your property without a formal appraisal right now. And when you look at damages, you look at before and after. Well, right now, we don't know that you have contamination on your property, so there is no before and after. So I would hold off on that and wait and see if you've got contamination, and then we can talk about valuation. Okay?
Can you not file a cease and desist on this until this thing gets under control?
Yeah, so we talked about the abatement remedy, but you're talking about doing something right now to stop it?
Right now.
That's in the hands of your regulators. So
Okay, so why can't you?
ODNR, EPA,
Okay, they're not doing anything, so why don't you go after them?
real hard to sue ODNR or EPA, and it would not be effective. I think there's a chance, now that we've got ODNR's attention, we've heard anecdotally that they're out doing sampling. They could put a remedy in place to stop practices now if they find the same problems we have found. But there are hotlines you can call to both ODNR and EPA. And if enough citizens call those hotlines and say, we want this stopped, then you may get their attention. So I would suggest, to the extent you want the fly ash problem addressed immediately, you make calls to those hotlines. Region 7, the EPA that oversees this, is in Kansas City, Kansas. ODNR is in Jeff City. So you can make complaints online or via telephone. If that's what you want to do, I would recommend doing it.
It's kind of bypassing the problem here. and we the people, as usual, we're always taking a back seat here to everything. I've got another question. I don't trust DNR just like Bill was indicating. So how do we know that that liner out there is permitted for what's going on here?
We find more out about that liner in discovering the lawsuit for sure.
Yeah, but how far down is this? How many days? How many weeks?
Those are questions we still have, answers we still need to receive, and we will.
And in the meantime, this probably is still leaching into that lake. You guys don't have the big enough guns to do this?
With regard to leachate into the lake, remember they excavated the ponds to pull the fly ash out of the ponds and put them in the landfill. Now, we don't know why they did that, but you can presume they knew they had migration from the sampling I showed you earlier. They had monitoring wells that showed migration. They then dug the fly ash out of the ponds, and I don't have their well data after that. So we hope to get that in discovery, but as of now, whether that same migration problem I showed you from 2016 to 2018 exists or not into the groundwater, we just don't know. But the regulators should know, because that data should be shared with the regulators. So we hope to get, we've made an open records request to the regulators to get that data, and we hope to get that in the very near future.
Yeah, I'm not for sure when the next meeting will occur. I want to address, is there an echo on this? So TJ kind of talked a little bit, I keep hearing about the class action or individual lawsuits. In a class action, a lot of times your damages have to be identical to everybody else's damages, okay? So that works when it's a BMW that the door is broke on. Everybody got a BMW gets a new door. In these type of personal injury cases, land cases, it's tough. So I sued Bayer for contaminating the United States rice supply with GMO rice. We sell all of our rice to Europe. Europe doesn't take GMO products. Went to Louisiana, I represented every rice farmer, we filed individual cases. So I've been on both sides. I know that everybody up here, we've defended cases, we've worked for big companies. What gets big companies' attention is there's power in numbers. There's powers in a lot of lawsuits. And I want to make sure we're clear, because I think there's, this lawsuit's not going to stem from just one person suing. They could settle with them tomorrow, and then you guys are still left here. So it's important to get individual lawsuits on file, get individual trial dates, and make Evergy understand there's going to be a trial every 2 months. And if they win one, they got 100 more behind that. So it's important to get the cases signed up, to get the cases on file. There's talk about whether you should go out and spend your own money doing things. That's what you hire law firms for. We'll go find the experts to prove the case. So if we're going to make a claim that your house was devalued, we'll get the appraisals on your house. No money should come out of your guys' pockets in litigation. It's why you hire a law firm for. I'm from Pettis County. My dad was mayor, county commissioner. We had a similar thing over there 20 years ago with Alkalac that people were around that contaminated the east side of Sedalia. So I know this is scary times. We don't have all the answers. I wish I could tell you in 3 months we're going to have more answers. If companies did the right thing, or insurance companies did the right things, we'd be out of business. Okay, so Evergy's going to fight. We're going to have to keep digging. We'll have our own experts go out, run tests on their water. But we have to prove the case. Evergy just has to sit back and throw. And in the Bayer case, when the rice seed was all over the place, they would say a bird came and got the seed from Louisiana, and then it seeded and it got in the check. We tried those cases. I think it took 13 trials before they settled with everybody.
But I'm a big fan of individual cases. Class actions, you don't get, an individual doesn't control whether that case settles, how much you get. So everybody's got a different opinion. I don't like doing class actions. I like to sign everybody up. Everybody has their day in court. And then when it settles, we treat everybody's damages to what it should be, not just some global settlement. So I think we're done at 7:30, so we can see. You've waited.
One last question. The only thing I'd like to know if you can share with everybody what the cost is for the analysis as far as soil samples and water samples go. So everybody just kind of has an idea of what they're looking at.
Are you talking, if you hire our law firm, we pay for all the soil samples. So.
Yeah, just like a generic ballpark figure, what that's going to cost.
Okay, once again, really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Really appreciate everybody's attention. I understand everybody's concern. Like I said, we have some answers. We are doing everything we can to dig for more. And what I can say is we will find them. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.